Well, I was inspired by a movie called Star Wars in 1977. I saw it in the theaters. And then I saw Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, and that's when I realized I really wanted to be like the dude in the movies doing the action. And then I think what cemented it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I really, really was became fascinated with the whole filmmaking process and acting and all that. And then I did a play in high school, and then I took some acting classes in college, and that's when I really started to develop appreciation for the art and craft of acting. And then I didn't, they don't teach you how to break into the business. They teach you the craft. So I went to the bookstore and I got some books on the business of acting. And that's when I learned about, agents and headshots and, which are photos. So I had some photos done, and then I found my friend found out about an open call for audition for the Karate Kid 3. They were looking for a new villain. And that character turned out to be the character of Mike Barnes. So I went down there with about 1,500 other people, and um, I didn't know him at the time, but Sean Kanan was also in line, and the director came out and he started dismissing everybody. John Avildsen was the director, and
Yeah.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then he stopped at me and he started walking towards me and he says, "Hey, how old are you?" And I said, "I'm 22, sir," which is what I was. And he says, "Oh, you look a little old to be in the movie. We're looking for somebody who looks like they're maybe closer to high school age." So I was a little disappointed, but he took my picture and resume anyways. And then I thought that was that. And a week later, his casting director, a lovely woman by the name of Carol Jones, called me and said that they still haven't cast the role. Could I please come down and audition, which I did.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any acting experience at the time, but I thought I was pretty good. And I read and gave probably the worst audition she'd ever seen. She was very, she was very nice though, and she says, "Mr. Ford, that was very good." And I thought, wow, she loves me. I'm in. And later on, years later, I realized that she was just being very nice.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I didn't get cast for that, and then I was just like, oh, I got depressed. I didn't make it. And then the day before they were supposed to actually start production, I get a call from her again, and they said, "Hey, we've cast the part of Mike Barnes, but there's been some rewrites to the script. We need you to come down because he needs some henchmen." And I said, "Okay." So I went down, and then I'm waiting in the studio. In Burbank. And then like Ralph Macchio shows up on, and I'm just like, oh my God. And he's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? My name is Ralph." And I'm like, "Yes, I know." And it was very surreal. And on set that day also was Sensei Fumio Demura, who
Oh yes. Yeah.
I've spoken I've spoken at length about, one of my mentors. And he knew me. And he was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, Sensei, I'm here to audition for being one of the bad guys, I guess." And then finally, John Avildsen shows up, and uh, they bring me over to him, and he says, "Oh, well, how old are you?" I said, "I'm 22, sir." And he looks at me, and then Sensei Demura says, "Hey, John, this kid, okay, don't worry." And he said, "Well, good enough for Sensei, good enough for me. Okay, you're hired." And then they were off. We were off to the races. Now, at that time, Mike Barnes had been cast by another young man.
Yeah.
Yeah, his name was Darrow. I don't remember his last name. He was there for about a week or so doing the rehearsals and everything. And one day he was gone. And we were like, "Well, what happened to Darrow?" And they're like, "Yeah, we gotta recast." And then Sean Kanan got the role. And, he really was the best choice for Mike Barnes. Many years later, I can't think of anybody who might have been better. Now, Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee, when Sean was in the hospital and it looked like he might
Yeah.
not return, Brandon Lee was being brought in to audition for it, and it might have gone to Brandon Lee, but Sean got better, and then the rest, as they say, is history.
That is true because I did read once in an interview with yourself and Sean Kanan that you were also, like I said, you, as you just mentioned, that you were up for the role as Mike Barnes, but but then again, at the excuse me, but at the end of the day, Sean, yeah, he did a great job. It would have been interesting to see you in that role as well. To tell you the truth, it would have been really interesting to see how you if you would have played Mike Barnes. But Mike Barnes himself was a very ferocious character, just very raw, vicious, and he was definitely Daniel's hardest opponent in the entire movie. And then I think, yeah, even though Johnny and Chosen were very hard and strong, but Mike Barnes was just pure aggression all the way through, wasn't it? Because they nicknamed him Karate's Bad Boy, the Tournament Terror. The list
Yeah.
goes on, yet distinguished. but
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
looking back at it now, it was kind of like, the way that MMA fighters now are, when they are trying to hype their fights, where there's all this trash talk and, in your
yeah,
face and pushing people. Um, and honestly, I don't think, looking back at it now and looking how green I was back then, I was not the best choice for Mike Barnes. Sean brings a certain, back then, he had a certain natural cockiness about him that lent itself to the role of Mike Barnes. And Sean is not that same person anymore. He's gone through a lot. He's, lived his life. Um, but he brings that to the Cobra Kai version of Mike Barnes now, But
sure.
I don't think that I didn't have the right, I think, persona for that role as it was written. I just don't think it would have been as effective. So, I like to think that things happen for a reason, and hopefully, ultimately, these things serve us and that we learn from them. So I think it was a good thing for the franchise and for the fans that I didn't get that role.
Well, we're glad you're here anyway. That's the main thing, Sensei. As a Karate Kid fan, my dad, may he rest in peace as well. My dad loved every single Karate Kid movie. He even said himself that when he saw Karate Kid 3, he goes, "I love the way Mike Barnes fights, son." He goes, "But they
Mm,
always have to make Daniel the hero and everything.
for
That's
sure.
why hence he has to win." Yeah, but yeah, my dad liked every single character in that entire franchise, and we couldn't
Mm.
wait for it to always come on TV. We'd be glued to the screen. It was a great bonding time. I admit to that. Now, moving on to the program you did, 57 Masters, saw some of that, absolutely fantastic. How did you come up with the idea for that? Because it was just next level.
Okay. Well, brief, just a little correction. It's actually 52 masters, not 57.
Oh, my
So
bad. I'll change that on here.
no, no,
I'll redo that bit. Yeah.
57 would have killed me, I think. So a 52 is a workable number. I was 51 years old and I was going to turn 52, and I was thinking, okay, how can we kind of celebrate turning 52 and, kind of make it into an event or something. And that's when I come up with the name, 52 Masters. It's like 52 weeks in a year. There's 52 cards in a deck. It's a catchy title. So the idea was, let's have, a training session and a discussion over, and originally the idea was similar to what you're talking about, where, it's like, yes, we train and then we have a conversation, but the conversation is always over coffee. And if you'll notice in the first 4 or 5 episodes, I have a coffee cup in my hand, and then after a while, it was like we kept forgetting to bring the coffee, or somebody didn't drink coffee, and at some point, we just kind of like abandoned that part of it. But yeah, basically, I just reached out through my network, either people I knew or people who knew somebody, and I said, hey, would you be interested in being on my show? And yeah, I mean, people were, most of the time people were excited. I had a few people who were just not interested, and that's fine. And then there were some people that like the schedules didn't work out. And, we even got a chance to interview Daryl Vidal
Oh,
and
yeah.
Ron Thomas, two Karate Kid alumni. And those were special episodes because those guys were black belts when they got into the movies, just like I was. So, those two guys are kind of special to me because, we're kind of like, in the original three movies, we were the three guys who actually were black belts, at the time that we got cast in the films. So it was a lot of fun interviewing them and training with them. And we got to also do, the final episode was with Sensei Fumio Demura. We were very, very fortunate to be able to do that show because he passed away sometime after the show was shot. And then I had kind of held on to the episode. We kind of like were working with it in post production. We wanted to make it really, really good. I shot a couple episodes prior to releasing that one, and then finally, even though we didn't technically get to 52, I think we got to something like 36 or something like that. We just decided to say, okay, the 52 Masters is done. This is the final episode, and it just seemed like a nice way to end it, as a tribute to him. And I didn't want to wait too long, just because his students were they're waiting, and I wanted to give it as kind of a send off, a love letter to Sensei and his students, and that's why we ended it with that episode. So it was a great run. I really learned a lot from everyone that I worked with. It was a lot of fun to produce. It was just a labor of love for me, and I will be doing other similar types of things. I love to talk to people and have conversations like you and I are having right now. I love to do that. And my style of interview is like, I don't like to sit there and like have a list, and that's not my favorite style of interview. My style of interview is where like we just happen to be having a conversation and there happens to be cameras there, and it's kind of a give and take. And I'm sure you can appreciate this. You've probably had guests on that maybe just weren't good on camera in the sense that they kind of didn't want to talk much. All of a sudden it's like they get super quiet, and, you're doing, basically a soliloquy, and then you're going, well, what do you think about that? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, you're killing me, man. And then there's the other extreme where you get somebody who you ask him one question and they're like, well, let me tell you. And you could basically go make a sandwich, take a nap, watch all 6 seasons of Cobra Kai, come back, and they're still talking. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't have to be here.
Yeah.
So it's very nice.
Keep this fueled up, yeah.
There you go.
The way.
There you go. But it's very nice when I get to talk to people like yourself who, we're having a conversation. You know what? I'm asking you some questions. It's not all about me, because I want to know about you. And that's why I asked you about your martial arts background.
I appreciate that, Sensei. Thank you very much. I'm honored. I'm honored. When you did mention Sensei Damura, because I know he was, may first of all, I'd like to make prayer for him as well, that, may he rest in peace and his family given strength to get through hard times, as well as yourself and everything. Amen to that. I'd like to
thank you
for him. You're most welcome. Most welcome. And because I know Sensei Damura was Pat Morita's stunt double in all the Karate Kid movies, wasn't he?
Correct.
And because I remembered watching one interview with Sean Kanan, and Sean said, when he said to Sean to go and audition for the role, he said, Sean, you want to be in Hollywood, they have open call for bad guy. And he he did that and everything. And Sensei Damura, he was just next level. He was, because I know he trained with other big stars such as Dolph Lundgren, Michael Jai White. He did a lot for the world of karate, and much respect to him, much love to him as well.
So, like Michael J. White and Dolph Lundgren, they both have a lot of high respect for Sensei. He was the real deal. And
he was.
But he was humble. He was respectful. He's just one of the greats, and he's greatly missed.
Indeed, he was. Well, like I said, may he rest in peace. Amen to that. So what was it like when you came on set for Karate Kid Part 3? What was it like working with Martin Cove? What was it like working with Thomasine Griffith, Pat Morita? Out of all of them, who did you geek out the most when you saw the person? I mean, because obviously I'm sure you was a fan of Karate Kid 1 and 2 before you got casted in number 3, wasn't you?
The one that I probably fanboyed over the most is probably Pat Morita, just because he was so iconic, and then, also, me being half Japanese and him being Japanese American, I liked him in a show called Happy Days, where he played, Arnold. And of course, I'd seen the first and second films as well. So I always got excited when I was around him. He accomplished a lot. He had lived a hard life. I remember meeting Thomas Ian Griffith the first day he showed up on set, and I liked watching him work because, he's also another legitimate martial artist, coming in from a Taekwondo background, has also done boxing, and I think he's done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, since Karate Kid 3. But he's also a very fine actor, and, he's very studied. So, watching him, I learned a lot, um, about the craft, he's
Yeah,
always I'm not, again, I'm not close to a lot of these people. They're not like my friends in terms of like we don't hang out. I have some of their cell numbers, but it's a professional relationship. We're working, we're colleagues. We show up, we do the work. Sometimes you end up being great friends with people, sometimes not. But that's besides the point because we're there to get a job done. It's
yeah.
it's the business. So I will say that from the original trilogy, the ones that I feel closest to are Ron Thomas and Daryl Vidal, of course, because of their uh, legitimate background in martial arts. And then after Cobra Kai, I've become very good friends with Brian Takahashi, who played the young Miyagi in the Dream Sequence.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's my very good friend. We hang out, and he's been very supportive, and I've been very supportive of him. Um, Brandon H. Lee, who played Quan, is very nice. He did an interview with me called "The Beginner's Mind Journey," and he was kind enough to come down for that. Super talented, very nice kid.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, he seems nice. He seems good, and I wish him all the best.
yeah, and then Billy Zabka, who plays Johnny, he's just a gem. He's such a warm individual. Um, like when he first saw me on set, he like hugged me and said, "Man, I'm so glad that you're here." And he was, chatting up 52 Masters to all the other stunt guys, and he said, "Hey, we got to get a picture together," and it's like, wow, he's actually asking me to get a picture on his phone. I was, uh, I was just so blown away by that. I just felt he makes you feel like $1 million.
Oh, he
So,
does. He does.
and
Yeah.
then, as far as the younger cast, Una O'Brien, who played Devon Lee, she was a sweetheart. She and her mom, super nice to me. She's very humble. Just nice people. Those were like most of the main. I like the stunt people too, like the stunt crew. I like stunt people because it's like, hey, we're all doing fight stuff. And they're all, very very like hard workers. They're taking all the hard falls, all this. Um, I enjoy talking to the cast and the crew, but mostly the crew. I get along with like the everyday work people.
That's really sweet. I mean, because it's always a good thing to because they're ones who've put in a lot of the they're putting in a lot of hard work, they're putting in a lot of effort to make sure everything's run smoothly. I've been on production sets myself. I've worked there. I've done work as an extra. I've done work in theatre. And one thing that always I find a lot of deep respect for is basically the hard work, the commitment, the dedication that the people behind the scenes do. Because it's like I always want to say, it's not about us. Without these people who are running behind the scenes, make sure everything's done on time, they deserve as much credit as the people doing the acting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. Yeah, Martin Cove. I wanted to ask about him. Is he as intimidating in real life as he plays Kreese, or is he just one of those guys who's just one of the nicest people you ever come across?
He's hard to read. And I think it's because as he's gotten older, it's like you kind of got to catch him when he's not, tired. You can catch him when he's maybe, and he was never rude to me, but sometimes he's more quiet than other times. I was always very respectful to him, and I always called him Sir, Mr. Cove. So when I would show up on set, I would be like, "Mr. Cove, is there anything I can get for you?" And he'd be like, "No, no, 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 I'm good." And I think he kind of looked at me like, "Who are you?" And like, like, why do you want to get something for me? That's not your job. you know?